All right, why don't we, if everyone is ready, let's go ahead and begin. So this is the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority Board of Commissioners board meeting for Monday, March 22nd, 2021. And we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Leslie, are you on? Would you like to do the roll call if you can? If you're.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chair Edgar?
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt?
Yes.
Commissioner Green?
Yes.
Dr. Henry?
Yep.
Commissioner Slaughter?
Yes.
Mayor Walker? We have a quorum.
Okay, wonderful. And we can meet virtually due to Governor Northam's executive order number 53 that says that, sorry, let me get it up in front of me. Public gatherings of greater than 10 persons, I believe is 25 persons now in a room. According to code 2.2-3708.2A3 permits public bodies to meet electronically to discuss business required or necessary to operation of the public body in discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities in times of emergencies and to address COVID-19. Therefore, this meeting is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia law because COVID-19 makes the COVID-19 pandemic makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum physically in a single location. Okay. Oh, and we did the roll call out of order, but that's okay. All right, let's have a quick moment of silence before we begin. All right, thanks everyone. So at this time, we just kind of have, while we have everyone listening in, any general announcements, reminders from anyone? I'll note the ones that are at the bottom of our agenda. The commissioners, we're gonna have a special board meeting Tuesday, March 30th at 5 p.m. To approve the budget. And then we'll have to talk about whether we usually do a work session on a Thursday between our monthly meetings. So whether we want to do it April 8th or 15th, something we need to figure out. Our next regular meeting, board meeting is April 26th at 6 p.m. There are safety meetings every other Tuesday. The next one is March 30th. And our agenda notes the passcode, but I know it's on the website too. The Zoom link is always the same. The redevelopment committee is now a monthly meeting, first Thursday of the month. I believe the updated time is 4 p.m. now. And I'll check with Ms. Glenn Matthews, but I think that's the new update. The Resident Service Committee meets every second Tuesday at 1 p.m. and we hope to add more sort of consistent committee meetings as we go through the year. Any other announcements or anything people should know before we begin?
Yes, we do have one. I'm sorry, I was supposed to send it over to you and I was just trying to, but I'm too late. It went out on Friday and it went official out to the news today. CRHA will be opening its Htv Waitlist on Monday, March the 29th at 9 a.m. and it will stay open until Friday, April the 2nd at 4 p.m. The waitlist is electronic this year and it will be available on portal.cvillrha.com. That is on our website. It is on our Facebook page, and it should be on the news probably the next couple days.
Great.
That's all I have.
That's great. That's exciting. Well, then let's go on to the public comments, followed by FAR's comments.
If anybody would like to address the CRHA at this time, please click the raise hand icon. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you're joining us by phone, press *9. And we have Brandon Collins. Brandon, you are on with CRHA.
I don't know if he, oh, there we go.
There we go. Good evening, CRHA commissioners. My name is Brandon Collins. I am an organizer for the Public Housing Association of Residents, known as FAR. FAR is the federally recognized resident council and resident advisory board here in Charlottesville for public housing. And part of resident advisory board duties is also keeping an eye on the Section 8 programs. I'm just very excited that Housing Authority is going to be opening the wait list. I think FAR is open and willing to help next week. I think you're going to need all hands on deck from as many partners as possible. And we know how to access the portal, and we're ready to help. So if anybody's listening and needs help, call the Housing Authority, but you can also call FAR at 434-984-3522. Oh my God, it's been a while since I said our phone number. Anyways, it's my understanding that folks can also start putting their information in starting tomorrow on the portal so that they're up and ready and good to go on Monday. I hope that's correct, but that's my understanding. So I hope people who need a voucher will be ready to hop on that because it's gonna happen quick. Otherwise, FAR, we don't have a whole lot to update you all on, except that construction on Crescent Halls is right around the corner. Very exciting, and you know, folks are nervous, but also excited, and there are a lot of moving parts to the whole process. FAR is in the process of putting together an update that will go out to residents. And through that process, we'll be having a lot of conversations, and we're certainly going to share that information with you all. I think what's super important at Crescent Halls and any of these redevelopment efforts is making sure we all have the same information and that it's super accurate, because things can get tossed around so quickly and confusion can be sown. So we're really trying to avoid that as best as we can and hope that you all are doing the same. I think that's all we have for now. I know you're heading into the end of March and turning a new page on April 1st. And we really hope that all is well. And we know Housing Authority has been working really hard this past year on a number of things, getting things in order, getting redevelopment rolling, and trying to bring better services and a better life to residents. So we appreciate that and appreciate the partnership as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a phone caller in at 703 area code. Once I let you into the CRHA, please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes. Can you hear us?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Tim Sansone. I'm calling in from Century Force Security, the security contractor for CRHA Properties. Wanted to participate in today's board meeting just to go over some of the incidents that have been occurring at some of the CRHA properties in the last 3 months since the contract started in January. Our security team has reported a considerable increase in drug-related activity, primarily at properties including West Haven and 6th Street. There are particular units that the security team has observed and reported on as far as narcotic activity and gambling activity going on at those properties. There have been several incident reports that have been submitted for these properties that the security team has identified. They are currently coordinating with CPD on some of the quote hotspot areas on these properties that are of particular concern, attracting other outside non-resident elements to the property, which are somewhat compounding the issues at these properties. I also wanted to participate today. I understand that there's been some dialogue or conversations as far as the scope of our services and the contract in general that we have with CRHA. I'm not sure what's been discussed thus far as the continuation of our current security contract. I think everyone would agree or know that the properties that we're here to patrol and provide services for are definitely in need of some type of security service or coverage, which is what we're currently providing. But my understanding is that there's been a proposal submitted or will be submitted as far as changing the direction of services or possibly eliminating security services for some of these properties. I had spoken with John Sales the other day. Me and our director of operations have had conversations with Mr. Sales as far as the security services for the properties go. Based on budgeting challenges, we understand that a change in direction had to be made around early February after approximately a month of service was provided, just due to the cost of the services that had been provided during the month of January. We have, given in consideration of these budgeting challenges, we have put together a different proposal that would somewhat address these budgeting challenges while also still ensuring that these properties are also receiving the security coverage they desperately need. I have a copy of it. A copy was sent to Mr. Sales the other day. If the board needs copies, I can submit copies as well of the proposal. But ultimately, the proposal for the revised budget for these services were submitted with a approximately 23% reduction in services. So if that is needing to be considered or discussed, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions relating to the revised proposal or any of the services we provided thus far.
And Tim, I see that your hand is also raised, looks like on another device. So I'll go ahead and lower your hand there.
My apologies. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe we should hear from everyone and then go back to that topic.
So next up, we have Emily Dreyfus. Emily, you're on with CRHA. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Dreyfus, and I'm with the Legal Aid Justice Center. Our phone number is 977-0553. And I'm going to toss out some other phone numbers for folks because it is really exciting to hear that the Section 8 HCV waiting list is opening. And I think there are a lot of people who will find the online portal to be very difficult. So I hope that there will be lots of help, as Brandon referenced, I'm sure, for sounds like they're ready to be helpful, which is great. The phone number on the announcement that flyer that we got from CRHA is 326-4672. So I think if people are listening in and need some help with that application, that's the first place to try. And then FAR's phone number is 984-3255. And I hope that we will get a really good response and some people will be able to find housing. So thank you so much for your help in moving that forward.
Great.
Thank you, Emily.
Emily.
If anybody else would like to address the CRHA at this time, please click the raise hand icon. Or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. Chair Rutger, I see no other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the security contract, Mr. Sales, I know we're going to be talking about the budget. Should we talk about that at that point?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
But if Tim has to jump off, then it's up to you whether you want to accept it or not.
Tim, will you be with us in, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Oh, he can't.
Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'll be here. That's fine.
Okay. All right. I think we'll, we had talked about this a bit in our budget session last week. So we'll talk about that. We'll just get down to our budget piece in a moment.
Not a problem.
Oh, and also, Mr. Sales, so I need to amend the agenda. We had a late addition of a resolution, 1423. And so we would like to add that to the end of our meeting tonight. So I think, and it is a authorizing the acceptance of a payroll protection program loan called the PPP loans. And so we'd like to add that to the end of the agenda. And I think we need to make a motion and vote that we can do that, if I understand correctly.
That is correct.
Okay. And I
I
don't
move to add this agenda item.
Thank you.
Was that a motion?
Yes,
Then I'll second.
wonderful. And Leslie, I guess we need the roll call vote because we're on, it's a virtual meeting.
Chair Rector,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Slaughter, Commissioner Slaughter, Mayor Walker,
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Next, we have updates from commissioners, any discussion about work sessions, approval of minutes.
And I apologize, we do not have some accurate minutes based upon the dates are in the agenda. So we will get those to you at the work session. We'll have those minutes for both the December, January, and the February meeting.
Okay, wonderful. We did receive, I see.
Yeah, they were already approved.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll hold on the approval of minutes. Ms. Goldblatt, would you like to update us on the safety committee's work?
Yeah, so we've had 2 good meetings since our last meeting. So at the most recent one, we actually spent a lot of time talking about transit services. There a lot of residents talked a lot about this. I think there's some proposals to change transit services, and there was a lot of concern about the way that city bus services services Crescent Halls, given the nature of that population and where the bus stops are going to be located. And so we spent a lot of time talking about some of the hazards, just like for people who are elderly or have kids, having to cross really busy streets to get to bus services, having to walk a very long way, which is not feasible for all of our residents. And then also frequency. So thinking about how frequently people get bus services, which is really not feasible for some of our residents to have only hourly services. So to that end, I know that the Housing Authority has worked with this organization, C3 Sum, around a survey that's been distributed for all Charlottesville residents, but I think they're particularly interested in getting data from residents in Section 8 and public housing. And so I know that I think it's up on the Facebook page and it's been sent out in various other ways, but people who want to weigh in on how transit is working, it's an opportunity to do so. And I've had some conversations about trying to get a standing committee. This is at Mr. Kenneth Martin's recommendation, a standing committee of residents, and so FAR residents, and the CAT director to try to provide some feedback, since a lot of residents are active users of the bus services. So as routes come up to change, or as population's needs shift, it would be good to have a line of communication to the CAT director to communicate those. And then at the meeting prior to that, we had a long presentation by the Buck Squad, and they talked some about what the work that they've been doing, some of the successes they've seen, the ways that things function, what their training has looked like, what some of their plans are. And they fielded a lot of questions from residents who talked about some of their experiences and what's been going on. So those have been the past 2 meetings. There was also some talk at the prior meeting about a shooting that happened in the vicinity of West Haven, and a lot of questions about whether or not it happened on West Haven property or somewhere else. And we're waiting for some updates from CPD about that, since many of the residents felt that that it seemed strange that it was being reported as at West Haven, but didn't necessarily seem to be at West Haven, and they were frustrated about a kind of unfair bias or stigma against them.
Thank you. And thank you. I think that committee, it sounds like it's been doing remarkable work. So it's in a time where it's hard to meet. I'm really glad that that's been a place where people can get together and speak. Any other commissioner updates? All right, then we'll move on to the public hearing for the budget for the fiscal year 2022. That sounds, yes, that does make sense.
Yep, 2022. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Can everyone see my screen? Is it big enough, or do I need to zoom in some more? Are we all good? Okay. So I'm going to highlight some of the big things where there are like changes, because this is a public hearing, so then we can open it up to public comment. So the first item I'm going to highlight is the net tenant revenue. And this is a comparison from the previous 2 years. So we are projecting a net loss of tenant revenue of about $150,000. And this is after increasing the number of units that we've leased up. So we're averaging about $110 less per public housing unit per month when it comes to rental tenant revenue. So I did highlight that because that is a big loss, and our operating costs will increase even though we have that loss from the net revenue, because we are still leasing up the units. We're still paying the utilities, and we are still maintaining that unit. We do have an increase in the PHA operating funds. That's 2 things. It's an increase in the overall operating fund, and it's also a reflection of the $258,000 the Housing Authority received in shortfall funding. We actually received $652, but there were 3 different tranches of funds. We've spent the first, I believe it was $124,000. We've spent that so far, which you will see in the financial report, because it's showing a larger net income cash flow for the housing communities where we allocated those dollars. And here we're projecting to use tier 2 increment A of that 258,000. So we'll still have another 258,000 for next year's budget. But if we need it this year, we can also use it this year. But we have projected to spend it over 3 years instead of spending it all in 1 year. And we also have an increase in other revenue. That increase reflects the rent that the Section 8 program, HCV program, is going to be paying 6th Street for using their community center for a year. So we are going to start paying the Housing Authority, the PHA, for the space that we occupy to do business. There was an increase also to the administrative salaries. And that's because we did split the two programs, the HCV and public housing program. They were managed by one individual. Now it's two individuals, so one individual for each program. So that was a increase to the salaries there. That is also going to reflect the increase to the benefits as well. The other increases here were our expenses under PHA, under public housing, but they're actually revenues under the central office. So we're getting more management fee, a larger administrative fee, and a larger asset management fee as well for our services of managing public housing. So the more units you have occupied, the larger admin fee you pull. The other items are relatively the same. We did reduce the legal expenses for public housing. We're going with a new model with less evictions, so we wanted to reflect that in our budget. We're really focusing on counseling and providing the services and opportunities for residents to address lease violations and concerns before we move to a punitive step of evicting residents. One other thing, the tenant services. So we did add $50,000 under tenant services, and it's really earmarked towards a community-based safety initiative. So we've had the Buck Squad come to us with an ask. Peace in the Streets reached out last week. I don't know if they're asking for anything, but they did reach out. So it's potential that they could potentially ask for funding. So it's $50,000 there for that or for something. And that's really going to be the safety committee that's deciding what those dollars go towards. Ordinary maintenance. So as you can see here for labor, we've almost doubled the maintenance salaries. We're going to have, based upon this budget, 10 technicians that are focusing on work orders and turning vacant units. We have one director already. We have one work order clerk that's going to be focusing on inventorying our materials and equipment, and also inputting work orders and tracking those work orders to completion. And then we also added one Crescent Halls janitorial, which is just cleaning Crescent Halls and ensuring that it's safe and disinfected. We added that individual during COVID. We're projecting to keep that individual throughout the year because it has been a benefit to the residents. As you can see here, for most of our contracts, we've heavily reduced the dollar amounts. And that's because we're doing a lot of work in-house. Brano is like fixing everything almost. I mean, one day he's out under a truck, fixing a truck, and then he's working on lawnmowers, working in a boiler, elevators. So we've been able to reduce the amount of contracts we're issuing to third parties to do work for the Housing Authority. And we've eliminated the $253,000 for unit turns, because we've actually hired individuals that are turning the units a lot cheaper than what we were paying. We paid a contractor around $85,000 to do 4 units that we ended up going to finish after they were finished. So it's a lot cheaper for us to turn the units, and we realized that we have the capacity now to do it. We're projecting to finish 4 units this week alone, and I think we finished 8 or 9 already this month. So we're moving at a rapid pace, thanks to the maintenance department. The other item that's been cut here, and we've talked about it the last meeting, and it's going to probably be a big topic today, is security services. We did sign a contract for $240,000. We signed the solicitation was already out when I got here. We moved forward with it after going through numbers, looking at what we're projected to lose in revenue, the operating fund not catching up for a year because it's a year behind. when they actually look at our budget and what we actually did when it comes to tenant revenue. We really can't afford this service. And Tim spoke about the January services. The Housing Authority cannot afford what we paid in January, which is about $43,000 in a month on security. I don't know any housing authority that can afford that. That's about $500,000 a year. That would by far be the largest contract we have. So we can't afford that. And anything less than that, is it really effective? Is the question. If it's not deterring the crime, and if we're not catching individuals committing the crime, then why should we pay so much? $240,000. I just think we can do so much more with it in other arenas. And I've had the discussion with Crescent Halls. I know that was a big topic at the last meeting. And so I talked to Ms. Washington and Ms. Sandridge this morning about what safety looks like and what their greatest concerns are at the building. And it was identified as having someone at the door, just checking IDs, knowing who's coming in and out. And we can hire somebody to do that for a lot cheaper than what we're currently paying security to do it for. And we have more control over that service. So I just think that's the route we need to go. And we're not going to get to our goal of having the months of reserve by continuing to pay security. I mean, it's impossible unless we cut something else like maintenance or any other item. And in order to continue, we have to find something else to cut. And really, there's no more room. We've asked for more maintenance. We've asked to take care of the units. We've asked to turn the units. Now we're doing all those things. We have to continue that track if we really want to change this housing authority. Yes, we've done a lot in 7 or 8 months, but we still have a whole lot more to do. And if we change directions now, we're not going to get there. We're definitely not going to get there. We have to be committed to what we're doing. And this is a hard decision to make, but it's a decision we have to make. And I think residents are going to support this decision based upon what I've heard so far. The insurance, yes, our insurance has gone up. You can see the big difference from 2019. I think it's 2020 to 2021. And that was the inclusion of a property that was missed for a couple of years. So when that property was added, that is why there was such a big jump. There isn't a big jump this year, but we have heard adding some security measures such as cameras and other things, locks, will reduce our insurance rate. And I don't think there's anything else big here, but I do want to highlight the net revenue that we're expecting in public housing this year. And that's $357,000. And here's a comparison of the previous years, which is why we're in trouble status now. The net revenue wasn't there, $35,000, $13,000. This is the first year in many years where we're actually netting the cash flow that we are supposed to have in our reserve in case HUD doesn't come through with funding for a couple of months. If HUD didn't come through with funding now, we would shut down in like 2 weeks. And that's just because we don't have the reserve there. And that puts a lot of families out on the street because if we can't afford to pay utilities, then that's an issue. So that's all I have. We can open it up to comments from the board if there are any, and then public comments.
Thank you. Let's start with, are there public comments at this time regarding the proposed budget? As presented. And I know some of you may not have had the time, well, to look through it all, but let's see.
We do have 2 hands raised, Tim and Brandon Collins.
Okay, great.
Doesn't
Um,
matter which one, which order. I think Brandon's hand went up first.
Good evening again, commissioners. We've been pretty supportive of your process on the budget this year. We know you have a lot of things to consider. I think Mr. Sales and his team have done a really good job identifying priorities and ways that money can be used smarter. That combined with, improved staffing with the housing authority, I think is poised to make a big difference, particularly on maintenance. I know you've heard me say this before. As you're getting some of these units, these vacant units back online so that more families can be housed, not all residents who currently reside in public housing have been able to experience that benefit. So, we're really looking forward to turning that page in April. And I think residents are really going to start to feel the improvements that y'all are making, and we certainly support the way you've structured your budget in order to do that stuff. When it comes to security, it's been a rolling conversation for a number of weeks now. I think it's been fairly well fleshed out. I can't say for certain that we've reached a critical mass of residents to get their opinion, but the folks we have reached basically a consensus. So if you set Crescent Halls aside, I think the general feeling is that the current security company and the previous security company really weren't offering anything, any kind of improvement to resident safety, and that housing authority has been very responsive to resident direction on this matter, pursuing security cameras, but also willing to come up with community-based solutions to safety. And I think the presence of the Buck Squad and other initiatives that are starting to blossom, folks see that those things can really have an impact on the quality of their lives and safety in their neighborhoods. I think what's really important to consider is sustaining those efforts. And we can't just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But that's going to have to be a real commitment from Housing Authority and from residents and from our community partners to make this all work. But I do think that is where residents are consenting. And on Crescent Halls, I've had a few conversations. And I think we get a similar take to what Mr. Sales just reported, that, at the heart of the matter is having somebody there at the door. Crescent Halls residents for a long time have wanted 24-hour security. I think you might be able to have a door person for 24 hours a day for a cheaper amount of money than what you're paying right now. And it may be more effective, and they certainly may check. They might provide more security. You go to a big city, almost every apartment building has a doorman. And it's very effective. It's not intimidating. It's just the way things are, and it can be really helpful for folks. So I think that will be something that residents at Crescent Halls will find acceptable, though I'm not sure they're ready to make that decision just yet. So as vague as that all sounds as a position from far, I think that's what you're working with. It's unfortunate that you're going to hear maybe some other proposals from security tonight, just as your decision for making, your time for making this decision is really coming up close. So, hear them out, and let's see what we can do to see what residents want to see happen with their futures on this very, very important issue. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Mr. Sansone able to speak.
I just asked you to unmute.
Oh, okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So yeah, I would like to speak to just statistics since we've started patrolling as of January. And these reports that our officers submit are through our digital tracking system called TrackDick. Mr. Sales receives these reports on a daily basis along with other property managers as well. But since taking over operations in January, there's been a total of 147 incidents that have occurred in just the last 3 months. And this is for all the properties. Though of those 147 incidents, our system breaks down those incidents by severity type on a scale of 1 through 5. There's been 23 level 1 incidents, which basically encompass violent crimes, narcotic activity, and property damage across all the properties, ranging all the way to level 5, which are more less severe, such as maintenance issues or related incidents. So clearly there is a need for security, and I understand that the root of this is mainly a budgeting issue. I would hope that we could all agree that security is definitely a need at these properties. Given just the statistics here, these incidents obviously have been going on long before we've come in. When we started our services in January, our initial goal, which we worked on accomplishing, which we've done and continue to do, is strike a very positive and close working relationship with the Charlottesville Police Department. We've met on multiple occasions, one-on-one with different sergeants and lieutenants with CPD during our patrols, and off hours during the day just with police command. At night, especially in January when we were at full staffing level, we were patrolling concurrently with CPD. Our officers would patrol with CPD in our vehicles across the different communities, and that did have a very positive impact as far as statistically speaking. The dip, although it was only about 30 days in January before the services were decreased, we did start seeing results from that. And of course, these issues aren't going to be resolved over a month, 3 months, a year, or even years. It's going to take time. We had conversations with Mr. Sales that, again, these issues and incidents occurring at these properties far predate our company or even the prior security company. My understanding is they've been here for about a couple of years now, I believe since 2018. And just given the dynamics of these properties, it's going to take time and it's going to take resources to really address the challenges, the public safety challenges affecting these communities. Primarily when we talk about resources, that would involve, diverting and prioritizing security as a category within the budget. I understand that given the other budgeting shortfalls or concerns, that priorities shift, but I really don't think that, and this isn't a company sales pitch by any means. I think no matter what the board decides, I think the board needs to look at security as an individual topic and prioritize it and see what can be done differently. If budgeting is truly an issue, what can be done differently to solve this public safety challenge rather than, essentially gutting the entire program. I can guarantee you're going to see some negative consequences if this proposal were to move through. As we approach the summertime, the weather gets nicer. Statistically speaking, no matter what property type we're talking about here, whether it's public housing or it's a 5-star resort, it doesn't matter the property type. Statistically speaking, incidents tend to spike during warmer weather around spring and summertime. And if, especially now of all times to be considering this proposal, I think you're going to see a sharp increase in not only incidents and crime, but you're going to probably start seeing an increase in violent crime if we, completely remove all security presence from the properties. During our conversations with Mr. Sales, it did come up that we were looking at possibly having, unarmed security at Crescent Hall continue regardless of the outcome for the other family units as far as armed security patrols go. I would definitely recommend that. As we discussed with Mr. Sales, that's exactly what the Alexandria Redevelopment and Housing Authority does. They have a building similar to Crescent Hall. It's called the Dre High Rise. We actually have officers there 24/7, and those officers are armed. It's a senior living building for senior citizens and disabled residents. And we have officers there. We've had officers there over a year on a 24/7 basis, and they pay similar to the budget that we had set in January. Of course, every housing authority has different budgets, but just speaking apples to apples, that's the approach that I would definitely implore the board to consider, is to prioritize public safety and security as a top priority, just similar to the Alexandria Housing Authority. There are ways that we can address both issues, both public safety, security, and the budget. I just don't think it's the right approach to completely gut the program and divert those resources to other proposed solutions, because I'm not completely aware of these other solutions that were being proposed. I took a few notes here, but it seems to me that some of these proposed solutions are more like neighborhood watch programs. And I'm not knocking any neighborhood watch programs. Those can be especially effective, but given the dynamic incidents and issues occurring at these properties, I can guarantee you a neighborhood watch or community-based program like that alone, without some type of security support or police support, is not going to be effective enough to curb these issues. I mean, with all the issues happening at some of these properties, you have some very serious violent crime occurring. And that's not to say that it's impossible to fix, or it's going to permanently negatively impact the reputation of these properties. It is fixable, but it's going to take the correct amount of resources to divert towards these security programs to make it more effective. During the conversations about having or exploring having like in-house, like a doorman, for example, in-house directly paid as an employee, of course, that's an option. There's pros and cons on both sides. There would be some savings in that aspect. However, you also need to consider is the liability of it. One of the primary purposes of hiring a security company at all, no matter what the property type is or the services provided, is that liability is shifted onto the contractor. If any incident, whether an armed or unarmed officer were to be involved in an incident and there was a lawsuit, that liability would fall on the contractor. Whereas if you have a doorman, whether he's armed or unarmed, if there's any incident or any lawsuit that arises, that liability is immediately placed on the housing authority, just because that person is a direct employee of the housing authority. So there's a lot of these different considerations that need to be thought about before moving forward with any one type of decision. One thing too I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, aside from this conversation, is despite the short nature of our tenure thus far, we've only been patrolling for about 3 months, two of which were on a reduced schedule than when we started. We're encountering some issues with getting the right number of police resources to the properties. Our officers are doing the best that they can with the officers we have. We originally started with 4 officers working 10-hour shifts each 4 days a week. And at the beginning, we also had a lot of police cooperation, but since the direction has changed, we've noticed also a change in police resources being, patrolling these properties, primarily West Haven. Our sergeant has been reporting that some of the police patrols through the community since January have dramatically changed to where the police officers are just driving down the main road and not really patrolling the parking lot areas. We discussed this with Mr. Sales the other day during one of our meetings. But as many people know, a lot of the incidents that occur, at least primarily at West Haven, they're not occurring right there on the main drag. They're really occurring off to the side, or they're occurring in the parking lots. And, if the police are just driving through, in and out, just zipping in and out, it's not as proactive and it's not as effective. Our officers, on the other hand, are patrolling each and every parking lot. They are observing, reporting everything they see, hence the 147 incidents we've reported since January. But that was one concern that the officers had brought up recently, and it's a considerable change we've seen since January when we started. Ultimately, though, I really believe that the board should consider alternative options that can address, again, both the budgeting issue and the security issue together, rather than prioritizing one over the other. I really do think there is a solution that can address both, and we have submitted a proposal to Mr. Sales. I'm not sure if the board has received a copy of it yet, but it does call for basically a continuous security coverage of these properties in some aspect, while still giving a discount to the budget. Basically, our proposal we submitted was approximately a 23 to 24% decrease in the budget for security services than what was originally budgeted. This can still be tweaked if that's not enough. There are other ways. I just strongly would discourage the board from considering removing all security presence in it as a whole, especially with the summer months coming up, you're going to see a much higher rise in incidents and even violent crime occurring throughout the whole area, not just these properties, but the whole area.
And can I just address that really quick? So I did receive the proposal. The proposal called for amendment to the contract. The new contract amount would be $178,000. And during the conversation with Mr. Sanson and his director of operations, I believe, the conversation turned to, if we really want to fix the issue, we would need to have services like we did in January at $40,000 a month. And if the issue is not going to get fixed at $14,000 a month, cutting it to roughly $9,000 a month, what is that providing service-wise to the communities? And that's why I did not make the amendment to my proposal. So that's all I wanted to say to explain why.
Sure. In response to that, yes, as we discussed, Mr. Sales, to truly provide the best level of our most recommended level of service is what we were providing in January. The results were there, albeit it was brief for about 30 days. The results were coming in, and that truly would make an impact. Just strictly speaking, like I said, apples to apples, it is a very similar budget and approach that the Alexandria Housing Authority has implemented for their properties. I don't know if any consultation with either that housing authority or other housing authorities in the Commonwealth have been considered, but that was why we, proposed that, not only because of what we've seen just in January at the CRHA properties, but our experience in deploying similar services and approaches at other housing authorities like that one as well. But again, at the end of the day, we understand there's the budgeting issue to be addressed, and that's why having this proposal that we submitted, that's why I said as a disclaimer, it's not going to be the exact same service level as having, what we had done in January, but it would be able to still provide a deterrent and a presence, because if people start seeing that there's no security at all at these properties, then the word's going to get out, and that you're going to see a lot more activity happening at these properties, especially with the summer months coming up. Doing this different decreased proposal, while again we do recommend going with what we had in January, if it's not sustainable, this would still provide for some level of service to provide a presence and continuous deterrent effect while you explore those other options, such as neighborhood watch programs or other community-based programs.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple other people who have their hands raised. So
can I ask a question before we lose Mr. Sansone? So you've talked about Alexandria a lot, but you haven't told, you have this one option that seems like the most militarized of all options, armed security 24 hours a day. But you didn't say how safe that property is. What do the incidents look like there? So I would like to hear, I understand that you can offer this service, but what does it look like when it's in place?
So are you talking about the armed security services at Alexandria?
Yeah, you had mentioned you have a community that looks like Crescent Halls, where you
Correct.
provide 24-hour armed security.
Yes, so at that building, it's exactly what was being proposed for Crescent Hall. It's access control. It's like having a doorband, so to speak, but they use armed officers there. We were originally deployed there at the outset of the pandemic just to control access for residents only and registered caregivers. Mainly because, of course, with the vulnerable populations in that building, ARHA was trying to restrict unnecessary access and foot traffic into the building. They've changed their policies over the last year as far as relaxing who can come in. But there's been some serious incidents in that building alone. But even given those incidents, the area in Alexandria is a little bit different than Charlottesville. The crime rate and the statistics there are different as well, but the armed officers are there primarily for a access control purpose. And that housing authority is actually is currently reviewing a proposal from us to expand, adding a second officer, not necessarily on a 24/7 basis, but adding a second officer aside from the 24/7 officer to patrol the building and to patrol other nearby ARHA properties.
heard all that, but I don't think I heard you say how safe it is now. You just added more security. Did I miss something?
Oh, it's definitely safer. Since we've come in, and over there, they have a similar resident committee that similar to FAR, where those residents have a very close bond with our officers. We meet regularly with management there at CRHA. We have a very close relationship with CRHA, and since our services were provided or implemented from last year, the incidents have significantly decreased, and the presence alone there of having an armed officer has really changed the landscape there as far as the number of incidents occurring and the housing authority's ability to curb the activity. Our officers have helped now again, that housing authority has a different, I guess, approach as far as like evictions and their policies go. They are, I believe, still evicting residents that are in violation of their leases. Our officers have been integral as far as assisting CRHA with their policies and procedures in that aspect. I would strongly recommend reaching out to the executive director there. His name is Keith Pettigrew. He has been a strong proponent of ours since day one. And we've been able to assist the housing authority there, not just with this building that's similar to Crescent Hall, but they've had several other properties that we've been able to assist them at too. And overall, since we started, the incidents have tremendously decreased.
I'm going to challenge you a little further because those are great words. Give me numbers. We had 105 calls a month, and now we're down to 2. So what are the numbers?
I can get you the exact numbers. Let me pull up their account here. Okay, so in the last 30 days, they've had a total of 18 level 1 incidents, which again are the more serious incidents, but that can be categorized as theft, property damage, drug use or activity, and that's in the last 30 days as compared to, let me compare that to the last year. As compared to 38 level 1 incidents. And again, these are just looking at by category. If you look in the beginning, we had a lot of issues, and not only looking at these reports, but going off of memory. In the beginning, there were a lot of issues, not only with trespassing, but gambling and narcotic issues at this building in particular. Again, when I'm talking about this building, it's the one, it's called Ledre High Rise. It's very similar to Crescent Hall. Those were the main challenges that building and the housing authority had since we've come in. It took time, of course, having this building I don't believe has ever had security before we started. So it took some time and adjustment period for the residents and even CRHA staff to become accustomed to having security there. But once we have been, implemented and over the last year or so, a lot of the residents, a lot of the good residents there have been very supportive of us, of our presence there. They've been very thankful of the issues that we've been helping to resolve. And the housing authority has, like I said, been one of our biggest proponents there. I mean, there are some challenging residents in that building in particular, as the housing authority and our director of operations refers to them as frequent flyers. As far as like the issues or troubles that are caused by certain residents there. The housing authority is aware of them, and they have been very appreciative of our efforts and our activity as far as documenting those troubles caused by certain, again, frequent flyer residents, as they refer to them. So again, having the presence there has been very helpful to not only the housing authority, but a lot of the residents there during the transition period have become very thankful and appreciative of our service there as well. And their numbers there show it as far as incident reports.
So that is a high-rise situation. What are the numbers in a situation where like South First or West Haven, where it's not one building, it's
Sure.
property.
So we have, with the housing authority there, they have buildings similar to that, but we're not patrolling those buildings for that housing authority. We do have other clients that are very similar to like South First Street, 6th Street. They're not housing authority properties. They're one is a private apartment complex, privately owned. I believe they have certain Section 8 housing units though. And then there's another similar property that's technically a condominium, which is also run by a board of directors. But that has a very high crime rate. They have shootings there on a regular occasion. Those properties we patrol. The one with the shootings I'm referring to is called Sequoia Condominium. That property has actually similar to what we provide for South First Street, or at least what we did in January. They have 2 officers patrolling there concurrently for 8-hour shifts. And that is really necessary, to have 2 officers, because again, it goes back to an officer safety question. And I think that came up in past safety committee hearings or meetings we've had with CRHA maybe a couple of months ago, as far as, why are we scheduling officers the way we're scheduling them, or, why are they, patrolling in pairs, and all of that comes back to officer safety. And that's very common, not only here in this industry, but you even look at police. The same reason why, if you call the police for any of these issues at the housing properties like South First Street or 6th Street, if you call CPD and tell them that there's fighting or gambling or narcotic issues going on, they're not sending just 1 officer. They're sending 4, 5, 6, even more, depending on the incident or what's going on. It's the same reason. It's for safety reasons, and that's what we've done and currently do. We've been providing for Sequoia Condominium services like that, similar to South First Street and 6th Street, since 2018. I want to say 2018, I believe. And they have also experienced very similar issues as far as shootings, gambling, drug activity, and having those 2 officers patrolling together is pivotal in trying to address and curb those issues.
All right, I'm going back to that once again. Since you all came on board, what's been the decrease?
I can pull that up too. Let me see. And while I'm looking it up, this system that I'm using is it's called our Tractic system. Mr. Sills, I believe should have access to this. It's the same client. The system I'm using has a client-facing side to it as well, where these reports can be pulled on demand. It's a very helpful tool, not only for crime mapping and incident tracking, but just to kind of help in these situations when we're having these conversations about how best to allocate resources. The numbers don't lie. Statistics are a big help in these types of conversations. So this is the system I'm using, and it can be helpful in these types of conversations. But let me look up this property. So Sequoia Condominium, in the last 30 days, they have had 7 level 1 incidents. Again, those are the more severe incidents as compared to this time last year. Around this time last year, they had about 11. And we've been there since 2018, so I can go back another year, beginning of the year. And remember, just like with every property, incidents will spike around the warmer months. So we're still somewhat in the early of the part of the year. So any property is going to have more incidents later in the summertime. So going back to 2019, around that time, they had 14 level 1 incidents. This is the beginning of 2019. I believe we started with them middle of 2018, so I don't have any report incident data for early 2018. But you can see just statistically, and statistically trends will fluctuate. There's never going to be a downward trend that never ends. I mean, unless you live in a utopia, it's just not going to be there statistically. But if you look at the grand picture, the bigger picture, you can see, and using the system again, John, you should have access to this. So you have these report statistics as well, or access to them. These are very helpful in measuring the effectiveness of patrols and how better to allocate resources if there needs to be an increase or even a decrease, like the conversation we're having now. So it's not just unique to Charlottesville. We use this system at all of our properties, and it helps us, just like police have their crime mapping softwares. This is ours, and it's helped us and our other clients really map out problem areas and how best to solve them or adjust budgets accordingly.
That's great. Okay, any other, I want to make sure we hear from the other people with their hands raised. Any other?
Mr. Commissioner.
Yes?
This is Commissioner Slaughter.
Hey.
I understand, what I'm saying, about the security or what have you, and Mr. Sales. I had to text Mr. Sales one night, what I'm saying, to ask him if we were going to have security. Also, I've seen security just sitting in their vehicles and other, people just going inside of the building, no one being at the desk. So how are we protecting, what I'm saying, the residents if we don't even know who's going into the building? Also, we provided a bar list with names, an updated bar list of names of the people who shouldn't be in the building. Also, I've witnessed other people that shouldn't be in the building in there. For security not using their barment list, and it's right there in front of them. So how is this protecting the residents when we're just letting anyone come through there? Hello?
Would you like Mr. Sampson to answer that, or do we want to get the other?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So a follow-up question to that. What is this for Crescent Hall?
Yes.
Do you recall when specifically you saw someone coming into the property and they weren't stopped?
Several different times of seeing them coming inside the building and they're not stopped. But I don't actually recall that. Mr. Sales, I don't know if you still have the text. I might can go back and get it from my phone or what have you. But I had to text him and ask him, were we having security, due to the fact that we hadn't had security the night before.
So if for Crescent
February
Halls, the reason I asked about the date was because in January, we had 2 officers patrolling concurrently. One officer was assigned for access control while the other officer was on patrol. After January, when the schedule changed, it was cut down for Crescent Hall by 50%. We had 1 officer patrolling pretty much the whole time. Before, with the original setup, we had 1 officer who would sit at the front or the front area, the lobby area of Crescent Hall, and who would be able to have the access to the binder the whole time while he's there. But when he's on patrol, he's not carrying that binder with him the whole time they're on patrol, because originally, like I said, the setup was that 1 patrol officer would patrol the whole property and be in communication over radio with the other officer, while the other one sat at the main lobby area and who had access to the barring list. That was the reason I was asking.
We had no security. It was on February the 26th, and I text Mr. Sales on February the 27th. We had no security the entire night of the 26th. Every resident there was asking me where security was.
The 26th?
And
right, because I text Mr. Sales the day after.
And a slight correction. On February 5th, we agreed to have 1 security officer work 8 hours a day, 7 days per week, from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, a second officer will work from 5 p.m. to 12 a.m. for a combined total number of hours of 69.
Right. So So for the, first let me address the question about the security on the 26th. I'm looking at the reports from the night of the 26th and 27th, and there looks like there was an officer there patrolling. I can see, and our reports have pictures submitted with each one. Let me see. So it appears officers were sending about reports every 30 minutes to an hour. Like I said, around that time, especially at the end of February, by then we had only the one officer who was patrolling. So, I mean, it's possible that the officer was on patrol or on a different level of the building and that that you didn't see him at that time. But the officers here submitted his reports throughout that entire night. There's pictures and our reports too. Another unique feature with the system is each report is geotagged, meaning you can actually see if you're logged into the system where the officer was when he submitted the report. So it shows not only the picture that they submitted, it also shows like a GPS pin drop showing where the officer was. And then John, as far as responding to your comment, the schedule was actually finally changed to having just one officer 7 days a week, because I believe that was the original goal upon reducing it. But when calculating it, you had told us to reduce it down to completely just one officer, 5:30 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Because originally it was two officers, I think 5 p.m. to 3 a.m., if I'm not mistaken. And then when we reduced it, there were one or two proposals to what to reduce it down to. And what you had mentioned, John, was one of those proposals. But ultimately, after crunching the numbers, we had decided to, or you had decided to have us reduce it down to just one officer 7 days a week.
And do you know when that change, when the change happened? When did you go down to one officer?
Let me see, I can pull it up
At
on my
Crescent
email.
Hall.
It was somewhere around the early February, like the first week of February, I believe. Let's see. Better yet, I can just look at our schedule. That might be easier. And while I'm pulling it up, that's to my point. That's what I was saying before. And reducing the security is going to have these type of repercussions where it's all about optics and all about visibility. I mean, there's other elements to having a security program too, of course. But the first and foremost defense, whether you have an armed or unarmed officer, is just presence, is just command presence and visibility. People feel safer, and going back to it works both ways, going back to the conversation of having just a directly hired CRHA employee as a doorman. Having someone there as a presence means the world to a lot of residents, and we understand that firsthand. But when you reduce the schedule or reduce the budget, there's repercussions from these different changes, and one of them is just a drop in visibility. And whether we're talking about Crescent Hall or we're talking about the family properties, if we're going from 4 officers down to 3 down to 0, just the visibility of it, you're going to see a considerable change as far as a lack of deterrence and a lack of presence. But now I have the schedule pulled up. Let me look here. Crescent Hall. Okay, so it looks like we dropped down to 1 officer, if I'm reading this correctly, on Monday, the 8th of February. Because I believe the conversation to reduce security was had like urgently late the first week of February. It was, if memory serves, again, I'm going off of memory. We had conversations with Mr. Sales on Friday, but the officers were scheduled to come in at 5 o'clock, and we were getting closer and closer to 5 o'clock, like later on in the day. So before we could make any schedule changes, I think what we had agreed on is having 2 officers through that weekend, because that's what I'm looking at the schedule. It looks like we have 2 officers working that weekend. One was working 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. The other got off an hour earlier, 5 p.m. to midnight. And then starting that Monday, the 8th, it dropped to just 1 officer, 8 hours.
Okay. Should we, I see 2 raised hands from residents of Crescent Halls. Maybe we should hear from them while we're talking about Crescent Halls. Ms. Washington, would you like to speak?
And Chair Rutger, this is Joe
Yeah.
Rice. I'm back, so I can handle public comment if you'd like. Are we
Oh,
still
sorry.
limiting to 3 minutes?
That is a very good question. We haven't been, but that's probably a good idea.
Okay. And so next up, it looks like we do have, is that Judy?
Um,
Can
yes.
you hear me?
Yes. Mhm.
Hi,
Yeah.
Judy. You have
I
3
live
minutes.
at Crescent Halls. Last Thursday night, we had no security whatsoever here. I don't care what that little bebopper says. They weren't here. They are signing in. Yes, they are coming in and signing in, and they're watching them, and they're putting down apartments that are empty. And they have been told that the apartments are empty, but they ignore the fact. We have nothing right now. Anything that wants to signing the book and walking in. They're not checking IDs to make sure. They're not checking no barment list. We might as well not have nothing as have what we have right now. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you.
And next we have Emily Dreyfus. Emily, you're on with CRHA.
Thanks. I am very interested to hear from more Crescent Halls residents if there is anyone else willing to speak up, because I think that's the most important experience here. Really, we're in a wonderful position. 6 or 8 months ago, there was a lot of conversation about the need for community-based alternatives to help with safety in the neighborhoods, including Crescent Halls, but also other neighborhoods. And we now have, thanks to Mayor Walker and community members, 2 options that are really rolling. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I appreciate Mr. Sales' leadership on this, because we aren't looking at neighborhood watch. I think it'd be helpful to have Mr. Sales or Mayor Walker explain a little more detail about what is available, because the programs are violence interrupters and prevention. So if there are people that are causing challenges or, posing a threat or fighting, these are folks who will go right in and help isolate and help de-escalate, like help people calm down and resolve things without using violence or using weapons of any kind. So those are great options, and I hope we'll explore those more. The other thing is, I just wanted to comment that this process is difficult, that if we're in public comment, limiting to 3 minutes, I think is very helpful. And I don't really think a contract negotiation or, trying to work out a problem with a current provider is best done at a board meeting. So that's just my opinion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. What about Miss Washington, who might be able to speak more about Crescent Halls?
Sure, Ms. Washington, you are now on with CRHA.
I'm at Crescent Hall and my name is Alice Washington. What I would like for you to explain to me, your person sitting at the desk, exactly what he's supposed to be doing.
Would you like Mr. Sansone to respond?
Yes, I want to know what his desk person is supposed to be doing.
Mr. Sansone, would you be able to respond to that quickly?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So as far as that question, the officers aren't right now, since the reduction, the officers aren't assigned to the stationary desk post. They've been assigned to the patrol post, which is, you can see through all the reports, or CRHA can see through the reports. They're walking the property continuously. So they're not stationed there, I mean, we can have a conversation about posting them there at that front desk to control access. But it's a give and take. If they're, and that was a conversation we had early on with Mr. Sales. If they're there at that front post, they are controlling access. But if there's an incident that happens on the other side of the property or upstairs, their hands are tied. They can't respond to that if they're at the front desk, and vice versa. That's why they've been on the continuous roving patrol post. But I don't know if maybe that's why some of the residents aren't seeing them, but their job is to continuously rove when there's only one officer.
Okay, well, you've had one officer there. He's sitting at the desk. People come in, they sign the book. He's not asking for ID. That was the purpose for him, for the book to be over on the desk that he's sitting at. They sign the book and he see the ID. We have told your officers a couple of times about a couple of apartments that's empty that people are signing into. But nobody is checking IDs and checking those apartment numbers. And if you look on the book, or if you come down here, I can show you exactly which one. So see, that's not helping us either. Example, I came in last night, which was Sunday night, 11:45. 5 people could have came in with me, went up the steps, and the security person wouldn't have never known it.
So like
I went around the corner and I go, oh, you are here.
So like I said,
go ahead.
I was going to say the officers primarily patrol. They do their best to try to split up their duties between patrolling, and in between patrolling, they may take a break at the front desk. But with only having the one officer, they're basically doing 2 jobs, wearing 2 hats for one officer. It's challenging to be able to control access to the entire building and patrol the whole building at the same time. What I would say though is we have provided a resident dispatch number as a resource for all residents to contact. We have a 24/7 dispatch line. So even if, given the challenge with having only one officer there, residents can still call us anytime the officer's there on the property. And even if he's on the other side of the property, if you see something, we would definitely encourage all residents to utilize that resource that's there and call us if they see something. The officer can quickly respond and handle any issue that may be occurring. But at this time, we're just basically trying to juggle both. The officers basically just trying to juggle both tasks at the same time.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. I think it was published. I don't know if it was posted like on bulletin boards throughout the community. I'm pretty sure the Crescent Halls had published it in some type of publication, but I have that dispatch number if anyone needs it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. Why don't we move to Mr. Gathers, who's had his hand up, and then try to wrap up this portion, which is obviously going to need extra discussion now that we know that there was another proposal. But let's hear what Mr. Gathers. Oh, wait, his hand is down. Oh, no, he's over here.
Mr.
Okay,
Gathers,
Mr.
you're
Gathers.
on and you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Gathers, you might be muted.
Don, if you can hear us, you are permitted to talk. Just go ahead and unmute. Well, I can just leave him in the attendee allowed to talk list, so if he can chime in at some point. Might be having difficulty with his mute.
Okay, why don't we move on to some discussion with commissioners? And, this is new information. So we may need more discussion at another, before we actually vote on the budget. So I'm just open it to discussion.
So my thoughts are that we need to continue with the safety committee meetings and figure out what the plan needs to be there. If this is a situation where, I guess one question is, how were they allowed to bill for higher than the contracted amount in January?
They asked for the schedule of Millennium, and we did not know, well, I know I didn't know that what Millennium was working was not what was bedded out. Century Force realized that, and they did not let us know that, which is why they were able to bill for that significantly higher amount than what was in the contract. It was more than double what was in the contract per month.
So to that point,
So Tim, it's to the commissioners now, so you can send an email. Thank you. So I think that, you know, we need to figure out what this is. I've been talking about the entire time, what this holistic approach needs to look like. And there is one point that, you know, I agree with, and I've been saying that, is that we are at the time of year where just historically, you know, we do have an increase in all levels of encounters, which they are calling levels 1 through 5, I guess. And so it is something that we need to figure out, but I think that we need to work with the families that live there, with CRHA, with the safety committee. It isn't something that we can delay. And then we need to figure out what, I wrote a note down here to talk to Chief Brackney about this comment about officers only driving. And I'm assuming that they're meaning just through West Haven instead of any other part. So I'll see what that means, because there was one point where it was stated that they had very good interactions and they were like co-patrolling. And then it was this comment about that, you know, the officers not necessarily patrolling. So I'm gonna ask, you know, ask about that. And then no one wants to go through what we were going through last year. And so whatever our, you know, solution is, we do need to have, you know, we do need to have one. I know that council is in budget season and considering what support we offer both Peace in the Street and Buck Squad. But there are also some things that they can't do. So we need to figure out that we wouldn't want them to do just for safety reasons. And so if that's a conversation that needs to go better than previous conversations with what we need from CPD during this transition, then we need to have those conversations pretty quickly.
Chair Rutger, it looks like Don Gathers was able to unmute. If you'd like to go back to his public comment.
Yes, please.
Don, if you can hear us, can you go ahead? You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about the situation earlier. Was wondering, Mr. Sales, you had mentioned earlier that you were expecting or projecting a potential decrease of roughly $150,000, I think, in rental income. But then the last slide that you showed had a figure of 357, I think. I was just trying to understand the difference in what those two represented, the two numbers represented.
Hey, Rucker, would you like me to answer that?
Yes, please. I don't know if you need to pull up the image or, I know the line he's referring to, but I don't know if other people want to see it.
It should be up on the screen now. Let me clear up my screen a little bit.
Yeah.
So the first number you're referencing is the net tenant revenue. We're expecting $150,000 reduction in that as a revenue. We have found other ways to increase revenue, such as one-time shortfall funding. So we don't expect, well, we do expect to get it next year. That's because we're splitting it up, but it is one time. It's not something that we're going to continue to receive. The other number you're referencing is the net income. Yes, it says $357,000, but HUD would like us to hold over $500,000 in reserves for instances where, let's say there is a government shutdown. We have that almost every other year, it seems, where public housing is negatively impacted by that shutdown. Like I think in 2 or 3 years ago, there was a shutdown where for a month, the Housing Authority didn't receive reserve funding for operating subsidies. So you had to go into your reserve. HUD did catch housing authorities back up on that. But if that was to happen today, we could not sustain ourselves for a month or 2 months. So this looks like, yes, is a nice rosy picture, but this only gets us close to what our goal has to be in order to get out of trouble status. So it looks like we have $357,000 to spend. We don't, because that number needs to be $520,000 because we're having a monthly operating cost of $265,000 a month for public housing. So we're still not getting to where we need to get. It's going to be a 2-year process to get us there. And we only got this because we have to cut things. And we have to place priorities. And one of those priorities this year was maintaining the units, which the residents have begged for years.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And other commissioners want to weigh in on this? Mr. Sales, we're voting on this next week, so we don't need to come to a conclusion tonight. But if you just have comments you'd like to share tonight about what we've heard.
Yes, I need some direction, whether I need to go through here and sharpen my pencil a little bit.
One of the things that would be helpful to see is just pricing on what it would cost to have a full-time doorman at Crescent Halls. So the various things that residents have been calling for. So how much does that cost as part of the proposal, to sort of see what that looks like? It would be helpful too to get some sense of like some of the various scenarios of funding. I know one of the calls for the Buck Squad has been that they said that they want funding. They might be getting funding from additional sources, but to be able to continue the work they're doing, they need money, which makes sense. It would be helpful, I think, also just to see some sense of like the scope of what it is that they're proposing at the price, and then what other kinds of services might need to supplement that and what that might cost.
And so I do have a price for the door person, because I did add, after having conversations with Ms. Washington and Ms. Sandra earlier, I did go back and work on that. So a door person, including benefits, I can hire, and it would cost me around $45,000.
Is that, when you talk about time frames, what are those time frames? So that's one person.
So time frames as in how
like
long?
When they would work, because
oh,
you can't have one person work 7 days a week.
So it would be 2 people working that shift, but that's what it would cost us. The second person would be a part-time person. The first person would be full-time, working the same hours that Century Force currently works in the afternoon for full coverage, 8 hours. So they would come in after we would leave. And I did talk to Ms. Washington, and this isn't going to be something that we roll out overnight. It's getting a job description together. that incorporates all the duties that Crescent Hall's residents would like to see that individual do. And then picking the right person, which we had that conversation today, creating a panel around residents at Crescent Halls that's making that decision.
Are those hours working? I mean, is that the timeframes that are needed based off of resident comments?
It's the time frame and hours needed based upon the activity that Century Force was seeing. So we talked and figured out when we were trying to figure out adjusting hours after January, trying to figure out, get it to the contracted budget amount. Those are the hours we came to, and it's based upon the activity that Century Force was seeing. But that's all subject to change. Like if we find there's more activity at a certain time frame, we can adjust those hours to fit that need. And that's what having an employee on payroll gives you the flexibility to do.
The only other thing I'm concerned about is the liability. What is our liability if something goes wrong and there's an issue?
The door person would be completely hands off. I mean, that's the same way that security force is now. I mean, they are observe and report. They're not getting involved in any of the activities. And I think their reports would show that. I mean, there was an incident at South First Street where they called the police to get involved. They're not getting involved. They're observing and reporting the incidents, which is the same thing that this person would do while checking IDs at the front door. If the person is banned, getting involved in if asking them to leave, and if they don't leave, then escalating it up. But they're not going to get physically involved in any of these incidents. I don't think that's what we're looking for.
I'm not suggesting that they would want to get physically involved. Mm-hmm. My question is if I'm coming through the door and I want to get in and I want to whatever, you know, what if it's that person who harms the door person?
I think
what's our liability?
I think that's something we should look into, certainly. And I think that all of that will play into what we're currently paying in insurance, and what their proposal is to continue services. It's $86,000. I certainly don't think our insurance is going to go up $40,000 to cover this one person. There's still going to be a net savings. Even if we're at $15,000 is what it costs us insurance-wise. And the money isn't there. That's also something we have to remember. The money isn't there. It's there. I can make it work for a person, but if we're looking at a contract of at what we currently have or what's proposed at $178,000, it doesn't work. I mean, the money isn't there. We'll be in trouble status again next year because we won't have the reserve there.
Mr. Sales, please don't mistake my questions as thinking that this is where the path we should stay on. But I think there are some legitimate things that I want to make sure that we have thought about because certainly a lawsuit, we're not going to have the money for that either. So I want to make sure that things are in place.
Lisa, it's Dave
Yes.
Oakford. If to the extent that one of our employees was injured, it would be covered by the workers' comp insurance. Any increase in that insurance coverage is going to be de minimis. It just is. It's just, you know, you can always have someone get injured on the job. And to the extent that the person was told, look, you're not entitled to have physical interactions, and that policy was very clear, then there would be no liability. You know, if we provided the person with a gun and we knew that the person was a convicted felon, then yeah, we might run into some liability issues. But so long as the person is completely vetted and the policies are clear, there shouldn't be any liability whatsoever.
I knew I should ask you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Anyone else, any other commissioners want to speak? I'd like to say I not convinced by that this new proposal budget would help us. You know, maybe there are things I'm missing, but I'm still in favor of the budget as Mr. Sales has proposed it, offering more funds to the safety committee to then use as needed with much discussion with the residents, and kind of leave the details and particulars of what's needed to more discussions with the residents as we go along. So I'm just trying to give you some direction myself. Would other commissioners like to comment before we move on?
I was just kind of wondering whether there might be any impact on crime with construction beginning, you know, and people moving around. You know, because it seemed like that would sort of lead to a decline in certain activities once that construction starts. I don't know if that's just something I was thinking.
And I will say, so for both construction sites, both agencies are providing security. It may not be armed security or a physical body there at all times, but both firms that are doing redevelopment, South First Street and Crescent Halls, are responsible for providing security for the job site.
Okay, great. So why don't we move on? And it sounds like we'll be voting on this, it's March 30th at 5 p.m., I believe. If residents want to, you know, write in comments or, you know, connect with the safety committee, I would encourage that so we can hear from you. And maybe we can even send out a last note about when we're voting so we can hear more from residents. Okay, so why don't we move to the executive director update?
Goodness, this agenda is heavy on me tonight.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. So we are currently changing offices. So the Crescent Halls rental office will be relocating to South First Street and West Haven. So we're going to have a presence at West Haven for the first time in a couple of years. And the HCV program has already moved to 6th Street, which is why they are paying rent to the public housing site. We're currently working on our vacant units. We project that we're going to have 4 completed this week, 2 at Riverside, 1 at Mickey, and 1 at West Haven. We do have families that are ready to move into those units. We've done 11 new public housing move-ins in March and a total of 17 this year. We currently have a tenant delinquent account of about $51,000. We did receive some funding from the city through the CDBG program, so that will wipe out all delinquent accounts for the tenants, plus pay 2 months of tenant rent for April and May. So those notices will go out to the tenants who are affected by the delinquent accounts being wiped out, and the all the tenants in public housing who will have their rent paid, which is everybody. I did announce earlier that HTV Waitlist has opened, will be opening on March 29th, I'm sorry, at 9 a.m. and close April the 2nd at 4 p.m. Individuals can start registering for the portal tomorrow. It will be live for individuals to register. If you are on a CRHA waitlist, you will need to get a registration code because you are already in the system and it will not allow you to create a new account. So you need to call CRHA at 434-326-4672. The phone number again is 434-326-4672. The codes will also be mailed out to all residents, but mail is running really slow. So if you are interested, you may want to give us a call at the number. And I think that's all I have. Oh, one thing, I'm sorry. Tonight, we did apply for the PPP loan. We were approved. So it is a loan for now and until we go through the steps of making it forgiven to see if we qualify for that. So once we do go through that process, it will no longer be a liability. So tonight it's not even showing in the budget because right now it's still a loan. So if we were to not qualify for the loan to be forgiven, we would need to pay that loan back. So we must not show it as an asset. It's still a liability. So we have kept everything the same. At the point that loan is forgiven, we'll come back with the extra dollars and figure out where to place them. It could be not doing anything with it. So then it gets us to that max threshold for reserve, which will open us up next year of totally being open to do whatever we want with the money. We're just not there at that point yet. So if we do get the loan forgiven, which is $270,000, it will get us to our goal. And that is all I have. If there are any questions, I'll take some.
How long, when we had our first PPP loan, how long did that take before we knew it was forgiven?
I think we received it in May. After I got here, we realized it was forgiven. I want to say it was in October or November.
Okay.
It was just before our finance director started.
Yeah. All right. If there's no questions, we can move on to the redevelopment update.
I think we skipped. We actually have that resolution that we got on the agenda.
Oh yeah, I put it at the end.
Oh, never mind. Okay,
That's
forget
okay.
it. Sorry, in the printed out one, it was earlier. Don't worry. Never mind. Forget about me.
I'm sorry. That was my fault. After talking to Mr. Oberg, he did say we need to add the item to the end of the agenda. Kathleen, are you here to do the redevelopment update?
Oh, hello. I didn't realize I was doing it. I apologize. We've had a lot of exciting stuff happen over the past month. We had the groundbreaking ceremony for South First Street, which many of you were in attendance for, and we really appreciated that. And we are in the planning process since we recently closed on Crescent Halls to go ahead and get a similar event in place there. And I'm hoping to have some announcements soon once I talk to the Crescent Halls Resident Association about times that will work for them. We also have a really exciting announcement. Vincent Manny, our new redevelopment project manager's first day was today. And I sent out his information to the redevelopment committee. And if any board members did not get that email, I'd really like to know, because it means that we might not have your email entered correctly on that mailing list, and I'd like to correct it. Vincent's really excited to get to know everyone, and we hope to introduce him at either the next board work session or meeting. We're also in the process of having meetings with a familiar person, Dave Norris, who's with the Financial Opportunity Center, and we're getting a lot of options with that as far as possible having staff there certain days of the week. There's a lot of different things that we'll be looking into. And that's pretty much it for now, but there's just a lot going on, and it's just a really exciting time.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Glynn Matthews? Okay, yeah, that's wonderful to have the new redevelopment coordinator that we can maybe meet at, I don't know, one of our next redevelopment meetings, or maybe the next board meeting. All right, so now let's do the resolution, which I need to find where I set. So this is a resolution. Does anyone have, I'll go ahead and just read it, and then if there's questions, ask questions. This is a resolution number 1423 to authorize application to payroll protection or program known as the PPP. Whereas the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority, hereafter CRHA, is a local housing authority. Whereas CRHA is governed by an appointed board of commissioners, which is empowered to make all managerial and financial decisions for the authority, including the decision to apply for and execute loans and grants for CRHA. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has placed CRHA in the position of needing additional operating funds in order to offset the lost income resulting from crisis. Whereas CRHA wishes to continue to employ and compensate its employees during the emergency closing. And whereas the federal government has created a loan program in response to the COVID-19 crisis known as the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, for which CRHA is legally entitled to apply. Therefore, the board by unanimous consent, well, this is if we say yes to it, would, on behalf of CRHA under the Small Business Administration Paycheck Protection Program, and hereby authorizes and directs him or his designee to execute any documentation or loan applications necessary to affect CRHA in applying for, accepting, and administering the loan money on behalf of CRHA. Okay. Questions? I know we did do this before, so and it worked out. But are there any questions for Mr. Sales? Okay, if there's no questions, I guess we can go forth with a motion.
Someone needs to move to approve the resolution.
I move to adopt or to approve resolution 1423. It's a good number, 1423.
I second.
All right, Leslie, are you still there to do a roll call vote?
Chair Edgar,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Slaughter,
Yes.
Mayor Walker.
Yes.
All right, motion passed. Thank you. And so we have a last session for public comment before we adjourn. And then, as I mentioned, we will be meeting again. Let me make sure I get the time right. Tuesday, March 30th at 5 p.m. To move forward on the annual budget. And then also that day we'll have the safety meeting at 6 o'clock. So please do let us know more about safety before that meeting, if anyone has comments to share.
I do have one question. There was a on the agenda I guess a question mark beside the work session. The 8th is the second Thursday, but that is really early in the month. So I just wanted to make sure that was still what the board wanted to do for a work session. We do have an item that we're going to look to address, which is the relocation plan. So we will look to get that approved at that meeting, whether it's the 8th or the 15th, I believe.
Does anyone have a preference for the 8th or the 15th for a work session? This would be a Thursday, no redevelopment meeting at 4 that day.
I have it down for the 8th, and I think I have something else scheduled for the 15th. So I might.
And the 8th, it is scheduled on the 8th. I just asked because it was so early in the month. Normally we do it in the middle of the month. So since this is a 5 Thursday month, we're doing it really pretty early in the month. That's the only reason I asked. But the 8th is fine. That's what we have on our calendar as well. So that won't be an issue.
Okay, great. We'll keep it at the 8th. And I think those are 5 o'clock. We've been starting those at 5. Okay. All right, public comment. It looks like we have a hand raised.
If anybody else would like to address commission at this time, please click the raise hand icon and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Or if you're joining us by phone, *9. It looks like we have Alice Washington. Alice, you're on.
Mr. Sales, I have a question for you. I know with the security with Crescent Hall, that's fine, but what about our other units? What about our other sites?
So for the other sites at the safety committee meeting, a lot of the residents asked for other options beyond having a security firm, such as a community-based approach, like what the Buck Squad is doing, and other agencies like Peace in the Streets. We haven't heard a presentation from them, but they're also doing community-based work around reducing violence in the community.
Oh, okay, because I thought about it. Crescent Hall is not the only, site that need it. That's all. I'm good.
Thank you.
And next we have Brandon Collins. Brandon, you are on.
Hello again, commissioners. Brandon Collins. I work for FAR, Public Housing Association of Residents. Just want to remind anyone in the public interested in the HCV list, check out CRHA's website tomorrow to start getting your information loaded into their system. And so you're all set and ready to apply to be on the waiting list a week from today. And you can call FAR at 434-984-3255. I got our number right. I just want to say a couple things. First off, I'm so pleased that Ms. Washington joined us tonight. I think Ms. Washington speaks with pretty solid authority on behalf of the building there at Crescent Halls. And I just really appreciate her leadership. And I think you all can trust her her relaying of input from folks and her analysis of the situation there. I did want to just remind you all that, I do think the safety committee was clear on what it supports with this budget. And that is, how Mr. Sales had proposed the budget. I do think a little bit of work needs to happen. FAR will be at Crescent Halls a bunch this week. I'm talking about redevelopment and all the big stuff coming up. I'm trying to inform folks, but we're also going to be getting input on the bus stop situation over there. And we will certainly be talking to folks about the idea of switching up to a door person type model rather than the security company. And we're going to do that work quickly, and we'll be able to give you some input before your budget decision, and hopefully as soon as possible, because I know you don't have a whole lot of time to work through a tough question. I very much appreciate all of your all's input. It's so nice to see some of the newer folks chiming in more and more, and just consistently standing up for residents and resident involvement, and doing what's right and not being afraid to challenge the status quo. And I think you're all doing a good job with that. So do appreciate that. And I think that's all we got. Thank you.
And just one quick, I've been thinking about Lisa's question, Mr. Sales, since she asked it, and just from someone who has worked that late shift before and even overnight shifts in the past, that's something I want us to be really thoughtful about, even with that one and a part-time. It's been not sitting well with me since, because if that person's out sick or anything, we just do want to figure out like what backup and, you know, and even if it's increased a bit and there are, you know, 2 full-time, it's a shift that you can easily get burnt out on. So I just want us to consider what that could look like.
I agree. It seems like if we're going in that direction, we need to have some meetings at Crescent, with Crescent Hall residents to figure out what's needed. And then maybe there are roles that can overlap with other roles in the authority so that they can rotate. So it's not all on that one person. Other public comment at this time?
I just have one question.
Go ahead, Lisa.
For Mr. Sales, along that line, are there other housing authorities in the state that maybe have this model where they have hired a front desk person or something that we could ask? I'm not a big person on reinventing the wheel. If other people are doing it, let's find out what they're doing, what they like about it, what they wish they'd have done, all those things, and kind of use another model and make it better for us if we can.
I will start calling around to some of the other housing authorities that have senior developments that are similar to Crescent Halls to figure that out. I will say a lot of them have gone to, or a lot of them don't have security. Let me start by saying that because it's a big expense. Alexandria and Charlottesville is totally different when it comes to funding amount of what they get compared to what we receive in funding. Not a good comparison at all. So I will call around. Richmond has several senior developments. Norfolk has several senior developments. I'll call around to some of those housing authorities who have connections and figure out what they're doing besides keyed entry and security cameras, because that's what a lot of them are doing, are key card entry, access, and security cameras. So I'll call around and get that information. I can report back.
And does the crossings, they have a person at the desk, but I don't know if they're 24 hours or not, but they might be. It might be good to just chat with them about how that works.
The crossings does have someone at the desk. I do know that. I did see them last week. I was doing HKS inspections over there.
Yeah.
They have someone at the desk, and they also have camera that also helps.
And key card entry.
Right. I also just want to add it that at the safety committee, folks were basically saying they would like to look at the community-based approach so that we can plan it effectively and that there needs to be boundaries. And so that was one key thing I just wanted to make sure we don't leave out. It was stress that they're they just can't come on our properties and do whatever they want, but there needs to be boundaries that is agreed upon, like through an MOU, exactly, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't want us to leave that out, the conversation that I was hearing at the safety committee.
Yep, good point. Good point, thank you.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Sampson.
I just wanted to add that our proposal, as far as the security services go, I just wanted to reiterate that the proposal isn't mutually exclusive, meaning we weren't proposing that this is the only solution. I fully support any community-based approaches as well as to solving or helping to resolve some of the safety concerns throughout the properties. I think together, paired with the security solutions we've prepared in our proposal, could be a valuable asset. Of course, as we discussed with Mr. Sales, the more resources that can be devoted to a security program for the properties, the better. But I certainly think that pairing a security program in any form with community-centered approaches would be effective. That's not to say that our solution is the only solution. So with our proposal that we've submitted, it would still provide that cost savings while also exploring other options. It wouldn't be to say one or the other. As far as reaching out for feedback from other housing authorities, I will, if the board would like, I'll go ahead and provide some contact information for Mr. Pettigrew, who's the executive director of ARHA. We also have a pending, a possible contract coming up with the Norfolk Housing Authority. Ms. Karen Rose is the security program manager down there for the NRHA properties. They also have some senior developments. She has reached out for a proposal from us, and we're in the process of speaking with them about that. But for feedback purposes, I can supply the board with contact information for that. And while I'm at it, I'll also provide a copy of our proposal that we sent to Mr. Sales.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure Mr. Sales, I mean, you can send it to him. He can share with us.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Unless there's other, I don't see any other public comment on the panelist list.
I motion to adjourn.
And Leslie, could you please, oh, do we need a second? Sorry.
Second.
Chair Richter,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldblatt,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Slaughter. Commissioner Slaughter,
You may have dropped off.
Mayor Walker.
Yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.